All right, I'm looking forward to diving in today. I've got a special guest, Ray Gorman, here hanging out with me with Engage Movement. Ray has a really cool just story background. I love what he's doing in the PT space as well. And so, Ray really helps a lot of coaches and business owners help not only start a business, but really help them free up their time so that long term we're not trading our time for money, which is where I think a
Yeah.
lot of practice owners get themselves stuck into. So, Ray, thanks for diving in with me, man.
Chris, thanks for having me, man. Good to be here.
Yeah, dude. Well, why don't you give us a little background, kind of how you started Engage Movement, and you got a pretty unique story as well, and then yeah, we'll unpack some other good stuff.
Yeah, so we do coaching and consulting for rehab professionals and coaches, trainers. A lot of what we do is kind of similar in the problem that we experience, where our field has just been so dominated by this trade, time for money aspect of whether it's personal training, whether it's one-on-one PT sessions. And so, a lot of where I am today was kind of solving problems for myself throughout the journey. I knew I wanted to like be in kind of the performance world. I really enjoyed strength and conditioning. Did a lot of studying, a lot of training, a lot of certifications in that realm. And then ultimately, became a physical therapy patient myself when I tore my ACL and went through rehab for that. Um, and I don't think I realized it at the time, but that was kind of like the first inkling for me of like there has to be a better way for PT to be consumed. And at that point, I was like 21 years old. Like I just didn't realize it, but I remember being in physical therapy one day and kind of saying like, why can't my PT just like provide me like a more robust program where
Mm,
I'm just communicating back and forth with them and I can go do this at the gym on campus.
love that.
Fast forward, I go to PT school, I graduate, and I go into the outpatient orthopedic realm. And I didn't work a mill job. I worked at a really good clinic, actually. I had great coworkers, great environment. But I wasn't really working with like the client demographic that I wanted to work with. I knew I wanted to kind of be with more athletes. I knew I wanted to be with, people moving barbells, and the clinic just kind of wasn't set up that way. So about a year out of school, I started my own cash practice, like a lot of people do. I kind of thought like, hey, if I'm going to go work, per diem at the nursing home, like I might as well figure out how to work for myself. So started my cash practice out of a gym, very low overhead model, which I tend to love. Um, and then I kind of found like I had created a similar problem for myself on a on a smaller scale. Like I was just trading time for more money. And I was doing some work with a company where like everything we did was online. And I kind of saw like, okay, in person is missing these aspects of the journey. Online is missing these aspects of the journey. Like, why not put all these things together and kind of, position my offer as more of a solution where I could actually generate recurring revenue in my
Mm,
PT business, which at that time was kind of like unheard of,
right.
and be able to get more complete outcomes. So fast forward to, I think it was 2000, 2001. I had parted ways with the other company that I was working with, and really said, let me get back to my roots. Let me get back into the performance realm. And I've kind of gone through a few iterations of what engaged movement is today. But now we kind of teach, rehab providers how to exit the traditional clinic, start a business on their own, and do it in a way that doesn't make them time poor.
That's the best, man. I think so many. It's cool when you kind of walk through that in your own story, and I love how you were just like, dude, I'm like, I want to see my ideal patients, which I think is where a lot of these like
Yeah.
startup practices are happening, right? Where it's like, hey, I just have a desire to get out of the weeds of seeing people I don't want to see and seeing people 40 hours a week. But then ultimately, it's funny because you create it again for yourself as you get busy. And
Yeah.
I think it's awesome how you had that just background and being able to blend the two. What do you feel like are some of the weaknesses, like, because I see the pendulum swift, right? Like you get some people who only want to go in person, right?
Yeah.
and like that's it. And then you get the pendulum swing where it's like, well, I only want to do online, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
what do you feel like are some of the limitations of them separate, and then what makes it so solid when you combine them? You feel like,
It's funny you say that because I think that in some ways, like, I've almost got the reputation of, like, being the online guy.
yeah,
And so we're working to kind of rephrase that, right? Recondition the PT world out there to say like, hey, look, like we're not like the take your business online company. We actually don't really do much online only business creation anymore. We will help clients that have an existing online business because they're already doing a lot. They've already kind of got through like the hard part. And what
yep,
people I think don't understand about the online world is like the lag time from creation of the business to meaningful revenue is like maybe like 2, 3x what it is for an in-person business. So what we've really kind of done is we've kind of positioned ourselves to say like, look, like the root of your business, the foundation of your business that everything is going to build off of is actually off of the in-person
mm,
aspect, right?
I love
We
that.
want a solid foundation of in-person operations because one, it's so much easier to network with people. It's so much easier to get people to know, like, and trust you when you can have a conversation and interaction. And a lot of that is just because of the lag time. Like, if you and I were to meet in person, we would maybe talk for an hour. Whereas, like, instead of us going back and forth saying, hey, send me your calendar link. Okay, now it's 3 weeks until we actually sync up. Like, there's so much that we can do when we meet on that first set. But then we've got to realize that like there becomes a point in the client journey where people don't need to come into the clinic. They don't need time with you. They need what's in here. They need what's in your brain. They need your decision making skills. So on the in-person side, if you're so biased to in-person, the thing that you really strap yourself for is time, right? Like your revenue ceiling becomes capped inherently by the amount of time that you can conjure up for yourself, which is finite. So
Right.
that leaves those businesses needing to scale with people. Okay, not a big deal. No problem if you want to scale with people. If you go fully to the online side, what ends up happening is you end up losing a lot of that connection. You end up losing a
Mm,
lot of that bonding time that you have with clients when you're spending them in person. And I think we set ourselves up for like these false expectations
mm,
of how easy building an online business is because in theory it's very easy, right?
right.
Internet, a lot of people, online business, create an offer, people are just going to buy it. That is not the case.
Not at all.
You've got to be online, connecting with your audience, finding your audience, connecting with other creators. Like it's just such a different entity. So I also found that like the online side kind of lost some of that high volume per hour dollar amount.
Mm,
Like we can get clients to a high dollar per hour, but it's hard to get them to volume of dollars per hour, if that makes
got
sense,
it. Makes a
right?
lot of sense.
Like if you have 10 clients, that may be 10 hours of work per month, but like that's not a lot of volume. So maybe you're making $500 an hour, but like every 10 clients is $500 an hour. You know what I mean? As an example.
Absolutely.
So we've just been able to kind of say like, hey, look, like why don't we take those methodologies and mesh them and really get like I look at it like your in-person is your rocket fuel and your remote is your gasoline. Like both
Mm,
those fuel components are important for a business. One of them provides upside with volume, one of them provides consistency with a floor.
yeah, I love that. It's a really like great analogy because now I think so many people love the idea of having an online component to their business. Like you talk to any business owner, I want to get an online component to my business.
Mhm.
And they make that mistake of exactly what you said. They're time poor. They want to free up their time. So then, okay, well, I'll create a digital business and I'll create this course and millions of people are going to buy it. And it's
Yeah.
like, dude, it just doesn't work that way. You've now created an entirely separate, different business, and you don't have time. So how's it going to work?
Yes, and I tell clients all the time, like, if you're gonna build a $40 program, like, it's just as hard to sell somebody into your $40 program as it is your $400 program.
Right.
Because you still have to find the consumer. You still have to get your messaging across. So, like, do we have some clients that we've helped build to, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 digital businesses? Yeah, we do have clients like that. But do they have a big following? Yes, they have a big following. Did they have existing infrastructure? Yes, they had existing infrastructure. They just needed to clean up some of the business operations things, which is where we can come in and help and say, hey, let's streamline your onboarding process. Okay, let's position the offer this way. Let's make you consistent in the process. It's just such a different journey.
Yeah, and it's so funny to me, and then people will spend hours building this beautiful course in Kajabi or something like
Yeah,
that, and they spend so much time now, like I say, trying to find that new audience. And I love this kind of blending of, hey, I've already got a captive audience. Let me just capitalize on getting them even better outcomes
yeah.
with this other offer. So it's like I love that.
I think one of the things that you said too was like, I don't know if you meant it this way, but like there can be this worry around if your in-person clients are going to want to be on a virtual offer, right? A lot of times what
Yeah,
we hear is my clients only want to come in person.
so
And
true.
99% of the time, it is because the way that the clinician or the person the coach trying to put somebody on that offer is positioning the offer, right? So the way that we actually structure our presentation process of our plan, like almost completely eliminates that objection or gives you the opportunity to have a conversation around what would make that person hesitant.
Mhm.
And if somebody is tech adverse and they're like, well, look, I don't really want to be on an app, then you shouldn't put them on an online offer anyways.
Right.
So what our model, what we call the performance provider growth model, what that's really meant to do is it's not meant to help you build a business. It's meant for you to provide a service solution to the client that actually matches where they are in the journey on kind of the rehab to performance spectrum.
I love that. I love that. And so obviously you guys are helping them build this entire kind of system and process. Like when do you put one in? Like, do you implement it from day one? Do you throw the back end offer on the back end? Like, because a new business owner, they're going to have a lot of moving parts kind of coming at them, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, like I think for them, a lot of them early on, they just want to survive, right? So it's
Yep.
like they're just like, hey, how do I get more patience? So how do you like to coach and get people involved? Of like, all right, here's how you build this ship as you go. Is it, online? And I'm sure it's customized to the
Yeah.
current audience they have, but walk me through how you like to coach that.
You've gotta have your veggies before you can have dessert,
I
right?
love that.
Like you've gotta build the foundation first. So if you can't sell or position what is the easier sale, which is the in-person one-on-one service that you already provide today, it's going to be hard for you to position and sell a virtual offer, a digital mechanism, an asynchronous mechanism that you have no clue how to write, position, explain. And the thing that I always tell people is like, look, I promise you guys, the stuff that you're going to do with your prescriptive exercise program, the asynchronous virtual side, is actually not different than what you're doing in the clinic. You're just not executing it in real time. You're just writing a program where the feedback is delayed,
Mm,
right? So
mm,
we have two main consumers that come to us. We have somebody with an existing business, in-person operations that wants to scale via process. I do not agree that the only way to scale a business is through people. I think that with the addition of tech, we have seen businesses very successfully scale via process.
mm.
So we can come in and say, hey, look, foundationally, you're doing really well. The biggest hiccup for them is being scared that they're going to lose money when they sell a new offer. And
Mm,
you've got to crack a few eggs before you make an omelet, right? Like you have
love
to
that.
be willing to have that short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. So yeah, you might botch a few sales, but I promise that if you stay consistent to it, it'll kind of make up over the long term because now you'll be just as comfortable with your new operations as you were with your old operations. The second consumer that we help is somebody who is looking to exit the clinic, does not have anything in place. They're generally initially attracted to us because of our model, because we're kind of a newer age mechanism of PT. We're not going to teach them just how to build, a multi-practice, multi-clinician trade time for money practice. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just not the kind of business that we want to help people build. So we have to get them some baseline revenue, right?
Mm,
So we teach them how to do the stuff that we know will happen fast. Go create in-person connections, go where your audience is, sell, your first 5 clients into a proof of concept package. No in person there typically. Once you have that done, now you've kind of got, some of the coaching, the investment paid for. You're in a much better place. You can start to make better decisions. So generally around like the 8, 12, 16 week mark is where we're really kind of talking about, okay, now we can start to talk about this asynchronous virtual mechanism. Now
nice.
we can start to talk about getting your time back, generating more lifetime value per client. So that's kind of the general sense of how we progress somebody through the program.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's like, hey, get the base foundation built, and then now you're getting this nice extender to the business, if you will. Like, because you got to ultimately have the right skill set too, right? It's
Correct.
mindset, it's sales, it's obviously the marketing side will help get them clients, but it's like if they don't have the right mindset or sales skills, it's like they're gonna have a hard time getting anybody, let alone in their first program, certainly
Yeah.
not in their second program. You know what I mean? Or the asynchronous portion of this,
And we don't want to complicate it, right? Like
right?
let's get you started with what we know we can replace your initial salary fairly quickly, right? Like, I mean, I'm talking like in 10 hours per week, we can literally replace somebody's traditional outpatient orthopedic salary in 80% of the cases because that is just such a high turnover setting that like there's no reason for them to pay you beyond, 100, maybe 120 is kind of the ceiling that I've seen. Most of those people have director roles. So once we can kind of bring them in and get them to see the light of like, hey, look at what's possible for you, it starts to become easier for them to visualize making that transition, to start to, plan their exit out of the clinic, transition their way into their own business. And you can make a lot easier decisions when kind of the financial scarcity piece is behind you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another thing you alluded to a second ago that I really want to hit on was talking about scaling by process versus by people, right?
Yep.
Very fascinating, like concept, and I think a lot of business owners, their first inkling, like after they've gotten off the ground, they're starting to grow, they're time poor again. They don't know anything to do but just to hire somebody else, right? And so
Yeah.
now it's a lot riskier, right? When you're talking about bringing somebody on because now your only skill set has been treating patients, right?
Hmm.
And now you have to learn a different skill set. And so
Yeah.
of actually managing people and getting them up to where they want to go. So what have you seen with your clients as far as like being able to scale from this process standpoint versus, hey, I'm gonna hire a big old team and try to grow this thing?
Margins. Like I
Margins are a good
think,
thing.
yeah, I think that the hardest thing for people to grasp and understand when they're looking to bring people on is what that is going to do for their margins. It's like you've got to be 250 plus to really maintain some of those margins per session. And the last thing that we want to do is have somebody build a business where, their business is generating 45,000 dollars a month, but they're bringing home 3,500, 4,000, 5,000 a month. Like it just doesn't work.
Right.
And so I think getting them to understand that, like, hey, when you bring somebody on, you have a responsibility to your business to generate enough profit for it to make sense. You also have a responsibility to the person that you're bringing on to compensate them appropriately for the
Mm,
work that they're going to do. And it can't all be tied to treating patients. Like, that's going to
okay.
be really hard for them to be able to exit and start with you, where it's like, hey, you said I was going to be full time in 3 months. It's been 3 months. I have, 10 clients on my schedule and you're paying me $50 a client. Like, that's not going to work. So when we come in and we think about this scale by process, what we want to do is we want to take the existing provider and we want to increase the revenue potential that that provider can generate. Now, in a lot of cases for our clients, they don't want to scale beyond themselves on the clinical side. Maybe they do on
Right.
the admin side, on the support side, but they don't generally want to scale beyond themselves. So they're looking for something that allows them to make, 10, 15, $20,000 a month. And that's really hard to do without having 40 hours on your schedule in a traditional model. Well, in our model, you can do that with 20 to 25 hours a month because you're going to kind of filter over your clientele into this new way of service where you've got them on this prescriptive exercise program. They're paying you 250, 350, some of our clients $500 a month, and now you get to service that client in a way where it doesn't matter if it takes you an hour to create their program or 5 minutes. You're getting paid the same. So that scale by process concept is really just like a way to become efficient, right? That's really
Yeah.
how we kind of look at it.
Yeah, I love that. And that provides so much stability for a business, so much assurance for a service-based
Yeah.
business, right? Because I see this all the time where you get a practice owner, they get out, they hustle hard, they're marketing a bunch, their schedule gets really full, and then now they start that drop off point and they're wondering, they're constantly in the new patient game, right?
The revenue roller
Versus
coaster.
yeah, the
Yep.
revenue roller coaster, right? It's like
Yep.
now I'm constantly battling this, and this really solves that problem by creating retention
Yeah.
and increasing the lifetime value of an average customer. So, like, what do you typically see with the clients you're working with? Like, what's the average increase in retention time and like lifetime
Yeah.
value? Because that's the big needle mover, right? Because if you go to hire somebody or you start your practice, often the business owner is pretty good, or you bring somebody else on, or even the business owner, they're constantly churning people after 4 or 5 visits, right? And
Yep.
you can't build a sustainable business that way. So what do you
Correct.
typically see with this scale by process? What kind of like retention and lifetime value do you typically see with your clients at that point?
So I think you bring up a good point on client acquisition. And the thing that we need to understand is our businesses are literally operating the way that we've created them. So if you
Mm,
are in this client acquisition, cycle, it's because you have a business that requires you to be in a client acquisition cycle. Like, that's the first thing. The second thing is understanding why you're in that cycle. And it's because the way that PT is traditionally positioned, the pipeline is referral comes in, client gets out of pain, client goes back to do their thing. So now there's a fall off, right? And so, like, the more that we can understand this acquisition cycle, the less you're going to resent your business. So one of your
so good.
options is just saying like, "Hey, my business is going to require constant acquisition." Guess what? The sooner you admit that, the less you'll resent it, the happier you'll be in
Yeah.
your business, right? The second thing that we can do is we can change the way that the business operates. So what we've done is we've said, okay, look, if traditional PT as the consumer knows it, forget about what we think as PTs, as the consumer knows it, ends when they're out of pain. What we need to do is we need to position a problem and a solution that happens after the person is out of pain. Now, this
Mm.
isn't talking about a nocibic, you need to come see me for the rest of your life or your bones are going to go back out of alignment.
Love that.
This is saying that the problem that you have after you get out of pain is you have a poor workload.
Mm.
That is legitimately what happens. So what we've done is we've said, okay, now that you're out of pain, you no longer need to come into the clinic. There's a value and cost mismatch when that person needs to keep coming in for really expensive training sessions. So what we now want to do is we want to put them on an offer that is more economical for them per touch point. We put them on what we call a prescriptive exercise program. The problem that the prescriptive exercise program solves is workload management.
Mm,
So first we need to establish chronic workload, then we need to reintroduce load, intensity, volume. And in that time, we're managing the risk for flare-ups, right? We're managing the gap that exists between tissue capacity and psychological readiness.
so good.
That's really what we're managing in that time frame. So for me, that was generally like an extra 6 to 9 months of touch point with that client. If you're going to add like 6 months of programming, 6 months of prescriptive exercise programming to like a 10 session package, it almost doubles your lifetime value. It
Right.
almost doubles your lifetime value, which now means you need to acquire 50% of the clients.
Crazy.
It's insane. The way
Crazy.
that I like to position it is I actually like to structure that revenue as recurring revenue. So now it gives me, instead of my floor being 0, where I need to sell more packages, or I don't need to sell somebody into a continuity offer that requires a trade for time, like a lot of practices do. They say, like, I'll just come in for a maintenance session. Well, now you just have lower value visits on your schedule that generate revenue, but like they're still tied for time. So we can almost double the lifetime value. We can extend the life cycle of the client, 4, 6, 9 months, depends on kind of how big the gap to the goal is. And ultimately, we can get clients that say, "Hey, look, I don't need this service anymore, but like I want it because I couldn't imagine not having you there to be able to help me manage my regular training, to be able to help
So good.
me plan for a race, plan for a competition, figure out kind of how to restructure my life cycle or my lifestyle, right? So it's huge for that break off of constant acquisition.
Yeah, and now you're also getting to just stay in contact with a patient that you've already developed a relationship with. How much deeper is that? Like, I think at the end of the day, we find meaning in a lot of our work when we are connecting with our patients for long periods of time, which is why we went into this cash setting anyways, right? Because
Yeah.
it's one on one. But now you get that interaction continually. And if they have a flare up for any reason, you're the first person they call, not their orthopedic
Yes.
surgeon, not hey, I'm just going to deal with it. It's like they're right back in your office because they already know, like, and trust you so much.
And you'll start to have so much data on this client that you will have the opportunity to say, "Hey, I actually think we're trending towards a flare up." Like,
Yeah.
you don't get that when you're seeing them once a week, once every other week, once a month in the clinic with a low volume in-person cycle like we have, right? Like cash PT generally is. So now I'm interacting with my client 3, 4 touch points per week, and I'm getting to see these cycles, I'm getting to see these patterns, and I'm getting so much data that is just,
Mm.
like, insanely meaningful in actually getting them a full and complete outcome.
Yeah, so true. Man, I could just sit and geek out on this like cute chronic workload stuff and
Yeah,
like get in the weeds now with you with it. But
yeah,
oh man, Ray, this is all really good stuff. I think there's so much good value packed into this like little talk that we've had, and like lessons that I wish I would have known 6 months into business.
sure.
That I think are going to provide a lot of stability for folks who listen into this. So, Ray, if people want to learn more about you and how to get in contact and learn more about your program and ultimately how to get off the revenue roller coaster and stop trading time for money, how do they reach out to you?
Absolutely. If you are looking for, content, we do have a YouTube channel. You can go in there, search Ray Gorman DPT. If you want to find us on our website, you can head over to engagemovement.com. We've got all information on our program there. And if you just want to follow along or you have questions for me, best place for that is Instagram. You can find me at Ray Gorman DPT.
Nice. Well, we'll publish all this in the notes. And Ray, dude, thanks for the good insights, the good nuggets, and I appreciate your time as always.
Absolutely, Chris. Great combo.